very important concept is the concept of stagflation. Now, this is what you need to understand, the stagflation, because stagflation is something that people don't have much idea about. What is stagflation? Comes from the two words stagnation, stagnation, and inflation. Comes from the two words stagnation and inflation. Stagnation and inflation. These are the two words. First of all, let's see what is the general rule of inflation and then the exception, because stagflation is an exceptional position. It is an exceptional position. It is not something that is general. It is an exception. Okay. It has an exceptional position. Now let's see what the general rule is. What do I mean by stagnation and inflation? I'll clear this out. First of all, let's see the general rule. Now I'm asking you, for example, in an economy, there is high employment, or we can say there is low unemployment. There is low unemployment. Low unemployment means that employment is more. Fine. Low unemployment means there is high employment. There is high employment. Now, this is the first type. There is high employment. Okay. Now, high employment jab hai, what will happen to workers? मुझे बताइए, if there is high employment in the nation, in the country, do workers have more choices? Exactly. Workers have more choices. Why? Because the employment is high. Everybody wants to hire employees. Everybody wants to give jobs. Now, if I am a job seeker, I am a worker in the economy, I have multiple choices that I can select. There is no dearth of employment. Employment is good in the economy. There is high employment. And I, being a worker, I have a lot of options to choose from because there is high employment. There is no problem of jobs. We aspire for such a situation wherein there will be high employment. Every country wants high employment, wherein the workers can choose by themselves. Abhi to aap kaam kar rahe hain, abhi main yahan pe kaam kar raha hu, I'm giving you a service, this is my job. Now, if there will be high employment, I will have many options to choose from. Right? Abhi aap bhi job ke liye tayari kar rahe hain. We know that there is not much we can do. Why? Because employment utni zyada nahi hai India mein. Now, because IAS could be a passion for us, that is why we are aspiring for becoming an IAS. But agar private sector mein jayenge, there is little that you can do compared to what you can do in United States and Canada. Fine. So high employment means that workers have more options. Workers have more choices. Workers have more options. Workers have more options. Now, if workers have more options, now say, for example, let's take an example of Edukemy. Now, we imagine a scenario where in India there is high employment and Edukemy has employed these teachers that we have. We have been employed by Edukemy. Now, because there is high employment, all of us, all these workers that are working at Edukemy, all of us have more options. We can go to and do something else. We have options that we can choose from. When we have options, what we can do is we can together or individually go to Edukemy and ask them for higher wages. Why? Because if they are not willing to give us higher wages, we would actually go to someplace else. Right? So what is happening here is that the employers, that the companies will have to raise wages to retain the employees. When there is high employment, what is happening is employees will have to give higher wages to retain the employees or to attract the employees. Fine. So if we saw someone else, we saw, say, for example, we saw some very good teacher teaching somewhere else. Now we can give him very high salary so that we attract him to Edukemy. Fine. So that is employers will increase the wages to retain or to attract the workers. Now, when you have higher wages, what will happen? When you have higher wages, what will happen? Demand will increase. Demand will increase. And when the demand increases, when the demand increases, when there is high demand in the economy, what will happen to supply? The supply will increase. The production will increase, right? The production will increase. Now, if the production is increasing, employment will again increase. Why? Because we are increasing the supply, we are expanding our production, we would need more workers. So this is the virtuous cycle. This is the virtuous cycle of employment. Okay. High employment leads to higher options and higher wages and higher demand and higher production, right? But you have to remember here one more thing. There is a vicious cycle to it again. So this was the virtuous cycle. Virtuous cycle is it will increase employment, it will increase the well-being, workers will have more leverage, but there is a virtuous cycle to it. What is the virtuous cycle? It will be like this. It will be like this. Now, with higher demand, what will happen to prices? पहले इसको हम कर लेते हैं ऐसे. Okay. With higher demand, what will happen to prices? With higher demand, all of us know the prices will increase. The prices will increase. With higher prices, what will happen to cost of living? What will happen to cost of living? Increase or decrease? Again, it will increase. Cost of living बढ़ रहा है. When the cost of living is increasing, what would the workers demand? If the cost of living is increasing, workers will demand more wages. Workers will demand more wages. That would be the vicious cycle. More wages will increase more demand, more prices, more cost of living, again more wages. That will be the vicious cycle. Now, what we have seen here is two things. We have seen two things. One, the first important thing is that whenever you have higher employment in the economy, this higher employment leads to higher prices. This is what you have actually understood. Higher employment will lead to higher prices. Okay, so we have now established, by logically creating these virtuous and vicious cycles, we have now understood that if there is higher employment, prices will rise in the economy. Now let's make a graph. Let's make a graph, and this was the graph that was made by economists by the name of Irving Fisher. Irving Fisher is the first one who actually saw a relationship between employment and inflation, or we can say between unemployment and inflation. Between unemployment and inflation. So he's the first guy to actually come out with this idea between notice, he is the first one to notice there is the relationship between unemployment and inflation. Later on, there came another economist in 1950s. He actually developed this relationship he actually graphically developed this concept. He developed this concept into a full-fledged graphical representation. And now the guy is William Phillips. So it was William Phillips who actually took and learned from the studies of Irving Fisher, and he later on developed the concept and the graphical representation of this relationship that unemployment has with inflation. Okay. Now, what is the relationship? According to William Phillips, the relationship between unemployment and inflation is of an inverse relationship. Okay, so it's an inverse relationship, that if there is high inflation, there is low unemployment. This is the particular relationship. कि unemployment अगर ज्यादा है, बेरोजगारी ज्यादा है, तो inflation कम हो जाएगी. This is how we have developed that कि employment अगर ज्यादा है तो prices भी ज्यादा होंगे. If there is high employment, there is high prices. But high employment means lower unemployment, lower unemployment. So lower unemployment will have higher prices. Okay, this is, we are writing the same thing in other words. So this is the inverse kind of a relationship between unemployment and inflation. And this is what is shown in Phillips curve. This is what is reflected in Phillips curve. Phillips curve में यही चीज दिखाई जाती है. Now let's create a Phillips curve. He actually plotted this graph like this, where on the x-axis, what we had was unemployment percentage, and on the y-axis, we had inflation percentage. So what he did now is, he actually plotted a lot of economies. He actually studied a lot of economies, the European and the US economy. He studied these economies and he saw this relationship. He is the one who developed this relationship between unemployment and inflation. He saw that during the periods of higher inflation, now this is higher inflation, right? This is higher inflation, or 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%. This is higher inflation here. He said that during the period of higher inflation, there was lower unemployment. During the period of higher inflation, there was lower unemployment. So if there is a point like here, so this is high inflation, but lower unemployment, right? So we saw that in US economy and in the European economies, whenever there was a period of higher inflation, it was accompanied by lower unemployment. So he actually plotted the graph. And he saw that these were the years of higher inflation with lower unemployment. And as we gradually move towards lower inflation, what we see is unemployment starts to increase. As we move towards lower inflation, lower and lower inflation, what we see is unemployment starts to increase. Right? So he plotted all these years, and he understood that there is some relationship between unemployment and inflation. So as we move down, we actually increase the unemployment. As you reduce the inflation, unemployment increases. Okay, this is how he created the Phillips curve. And what is the Phillips curve? Phillips curve shows this inverse relationship, and the Phillips curve is like this. This is the Phillips curve. Shows the relationship between inflation and unemployment. Okay. Now I'm asking you, this particular region here, what kind of region is this? This region is of higher inflation and lower unemployment. Fine. And this kind of a region here is the region of lower inflation and higher unemployment. Okay, so this you have to remember. So on two sides of Phillips curve, we see two different scenarios. But if you talk about pure economic conditions, pure economic perspectives, this kind of particular inverse relationship, this is actually in reality a short run Phillips curve. It is a short run Phillips curve. That means, what do I mean by short run Phillips curve? Now, this was for the first time talked about in 1970s. Phillips curve came in 1950s. After 20 years of research, another economist, by precisely the monetarists, who was the pioneer of monetarist school? Milton Friedman, along with Edmund Phillips. Now, these guys again came in, like they challenged the Keynesian ideas. In the same way, Milton Friedman and Edmund Phillips, being the respected economists of 1970s, they also challenged the Phillips curve. And they said that this inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment, this inverse relationship is only true in the short run. It is only true in the short run. That would mean, now, say for example, how did they go to this reasoning? Now, I'll explain it to you like this. Please be attentive. Now, see, if there is higher unemployment, if there is higher unemployment in a nation, and the government wants to decrease the unemployment, I'm asking you, what does Phillips curve suggest us to do if you want to decrease the unemployment? If you have to decrease the unemployment, what is William Phillips telling you to do? Come on. Exactly. Increase the inflation, right? If you have to decrease the unemployment, what you have to do is increase the inflation. This is what the Phillips curve suggests. That would mean if you continuously keep on increasing inflation, there might come a time when unemployment becomes zero. There might come a time when unemployment becomes zero, right? But Edmund Phillips and Milton Friedman said that this is not true. The inverse relationship is only possible in the short run. The inverse relationship is only possible in the short run. If you are looking at the long run, in the long run, you will always have some unemployment in your economy. You'll always have some unemployment. You cannot make unemployment equal to zero. There will always be some structural unemployment or frictional unemployment. Well, unemployment is a different subject and different topic that we'll study sometime else. But you have to remember that you can never make unemployment equal to zero. The reason being, there will always be some people that do not want to work. There will always be some people that have left the previous job and are finding a new job. And between these two jobs, they are unemployed. That is a frictional unemployment. There is a structural unemployment. Now, such kind of unemployment will always exist in the long run. Therefore, Edmund Phillips and Milton Friedman said that in the long run, Phillips curve should look like this, because there will always be some kind of unemployment in the economy. And he called this unemployment as the natural rate of unemployment. The natural rate of unemployment. The natural rate of unemployment. And he said that this vertical will be the long run Phillips curve. This will be the long run Phillips curve. So according to the monetarist school, the inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment is always true in the short run. And in the long run, this might not hold true. And in the long run, we will always settle to a natural rate of unemployment. To a natural rate of unemployment. He also called this natural rate of unemployment as NAIRU. He called it as NAIRU. What is NAIRU? NAIRU means when you reach this point of a natural rate of unemployment, when you reach this point, at this point, if you keep on increasing inflation, your unemployment will not change. Your unemployment will not decrease. So if you keep on accelerating your inflation, if you keep on accelerating the inflation, your unemployment will still be at the same position. So therefore, he called NAIRU as being non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. Non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. So this point is your NRU, or we call it NAIRU. Non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. This is the long run Phillips curve, the vertical, that in the long run, you will always have an economy will always come back to a natural rate of unemployment. And if there is any deviation from the natural rate, in the long run, it will go back to the natural rate. And that natural rate is generally considered as 4 to 5%. So there will always be some 4 to 5% of unemployment, even if you have whatever inflation you have, there will always be some 4 to 5% of natural rate of unemployment. Is it clear?